Tonight we talk about the lost sounds of the Aztec ceremonies, a world that once throbbed with rhythm and chant, where sound itself was sacred breath. The moment you close your eyes, you can almost hear it, the faint boom of a hollow drum echoing across water, the hiss of burning copal, the whisper of feathers brushing against air. You probably won't survive this well, at least not if you suddenly find yourself dropped into 15th century Tenochtitlan during the Feast of the Sun, but it's worth the risk for what you'll witness. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to a twilight of stone and water. The city seems to float, balanced between mirror-still canals and a sky painted copper. In the chill air, you hear at first a low hum, not human, not quite wind. It's the sound of the city itself waking. The fishermen push their canoes out onto the lake, the paddles dipping in sync, each plop falling into the natural tempo of the capital. Tenochtitlan stretches before you, built like a dream of geometry and faith, for vast causeways slicing the lake, temples like layered pyramids rising from the fog. You stand barefoot on volcanic stone still warm from yesterday's sun. A boy nearby blows into a reed flute, its tone wobbly but ancient in feel, something between bird call and prayer. A priest passes, carrying a bundle of hollow shells strung with bells. Even in silence, you sense a pulse the city beats. You begin to realize that for the Aztecs, sound wasn't background. It was the bridge between humans and gods. Every note meant something. Every rhythm carried a message from the distance. A deep rumble rolls over the water, the first drum of the dawn ritual. It's a huaitl, carved from a single tree trunk and stretched with deer hide. Its voice is vast, low, deliberate, like thunder spoken by hand. You can almost feel your ribs vibrate. As it repeats, others join in, smaller tapanasli slit drums with brighter tones, flutes with shrill bird-like calls, and even the dry clatter of bone rattles. The air thickens with rhythm until you can't tell where your heartbeat ends and the city's begins. The priests climb the steps of the Templo Mayor, moving in measured time with the drums. They wear feathered headdresses shaped like flames, gold discs catching first light. One carries a conch shell pressed to his lips, and when he blows, the sound blooms wide and wet across the lake. It's not just a call, it's a signal to the gods that humans are awake and ready. Historians still argue whether these dawn blasts were aligned to astronomical cycles or the rhythm of lake tides. But what's clear is that every note had cosmic timing. You wander closer, stepping into the outer courtyard. The smell of copal resin is thick and sweet, clinging to your hair. Smoke twists upward, glowing amber in the rising sun. You think of incense as something that fills space, but here, it sculpts space, turning air into architecture. You can almost trace invisible corridors in the smoke, hallways leading from mortal to divine. Each new puff from the priest's brazier adds a percussive crackle that folds neatly into the drumbeat. Then a sudden hush falls. Even the lake seems to pause. The priest raises his hand, and in the silence, you hear a new layer of faint, quivering tremolo. Maybe the distant cry of a heron or the hum of the city's breath. It's easy to believe that sound is alive, that it carries intention. The Aztecs had a word for this, teotl, divine energy that moved through all things, sound included. When a note left a drum, it wasn't just air vibrating. It was sacred force rippling through the cosmos. You glance at the crowd gathered below the temple. Men, women, children, all watching, all swaying slightly. Some mouth words under their breath, phrases half remembered from myths told by firelight. There's a rhythm even in their stillness. Somewhere a dog barks, answered by another across the canal. And you think how every noise here belongs. In modern cities, you'd call it sound pollution. Here it's prayer. A historian once described Tenochtitlan as a city orchestrated. That's not metaphor, it's literal. Public life followed the music's calendar. Morning drums for the sun god, midday chants for rain, night flutes for dreams. You, the accidental visitor, stand in the very heartbeat of it. The next huaitl boom lands in your chest like a slow cannon. For a dizzy second, you imagine the whole city pulsing at once, the lake rippling, the temples trembling, and maybe the gods themselves nodding in rhythm. There's humor in realizing how organized the chaos is. Somewhere, a drummer probably missed a beat and got scolded by a priestly supervisor divine HR situation. And yet, somehow, it's perfect. The music isn't meant to impress. It's meant to connect as the first rays of sun strike the gold tips of the temples. A collective sigh moves through the crowd. The ritual has done its job. It's birthed another day. The Huaidl's tone softens, fading like thunder rolling into distance. You can still hear its echo bouncing off the lake's surface long after the final strike. Someone behind you mutters that if the drums ever fell silent, the sun might not rise. And for a moment, you believe it. You look toward the eastern horizon where the light thickens, golden and sure, and you wonder if that's why every morning began with such devotion. To keep the universe's soundtrack from skipping, the priests begin their descent, conch shells swinging softly at their sides. The crowd disperses slowly, reluctant to let the silence win. You walk toward the canal, where a fisherman hums a tune passed down through generations. You recognize the melody, you feel it. It's the same rhythm the drums played, stripped down to a single human breath. Maybe that's what sound meant here, proof that you existed, that the world was still listening. The sun has barely cleared the horizon when another sound begins to weave itself into the waking era deep, resonant moan that doesn't seem to belong to any instrument you know. You follow it through a narrow passage between stone walls slick with dew, toward the lake's edge where mist curls like pale smoke. The sound rises again, ancient and hollow, both mournful and commanding. It's the breath of the shell trumpet, the Tenochtitlan. A priest stands knee-deep in the water, conch held to his lips. His robe, dyed a rich indigo, clings to him like wet parchment. Around him, younger acolytes scatter petals and maze into the lake. Each petal lands with a quiet plink, like punctuation to the trumpet's sentences. You edge closer, the reeds whispering against your legs, and the smell of damp clay fills your nose. The sound expands, echoing across the water until even the herons take flight. The Aztecs believed this conch called the gods of wind and water, especially Acatl, the breath giver, the invisible mover of clouds. The priests didn't just play it, they summoned with it. The note itself was a prayer, a request wrapped in air. Historians still argue whether the shape of the shell, its spiral geometry, was chosen for acoustics or cosmology. Either way, you feel the vibration in your chest as though the sound is trying to unspool your heartbeat. You remember the first drum beats from earlier and realize how perfectly the shell fits in the orchestra of the morning, like a long sigh after thunder. The conch tones roll in low waves, and when they fade, they leave behind silence so charged it almost hums. Then, from somewhere behind you, another blast answers a duet across the lake. You imagine dozens of priests at once, stationed on different islands, timing their calls to the rising sun, creating a surround sound experience the gods could hardly ignore. The priest lowers the shell and exhales, face glistening. You expect ceremony to end there, but no. Now he tips the conch and pours water from its mouth into his hands. He lifts the droplets skyward before letting them fall back to the lake. The gesture is simple, almost casual, yet you sense it carries a logic deeper than words. What comes from the water returns to it. Behind him, a line of boys begins to beat small turtle shell drums with reeds. The sound is sharp, metallic like raindrops on tin. Their rhythm mirrors the conch's call, quickening with each breath. Together they create an alternating pulse, breath and strike, inhale and exhale. It's hypnotic. A woman nearby starts to sing, not loudly, but with a low hum that folds into the pattern. Her song has no clear beginning or end, like waves overlapping. Later historians will write that women often join ceremonial music not as performers, but as conduits, blending human voice with divine rhythm. You can't help smiling at the thought divine rhythm needs a soprano section. You glance at her face and see something familiar, joy mixed with solemn duty. That look of someone who knows the world's secrets might be carried in a tune. For a brief moment, you feel envious. You, with all your modern playlists and wireless earbuds, have never heard sound mean this much. The priest raises the shell again, but this time he points it toward the temple skyline instead of the water. The call that follows is higher, fiercer, a sound that splits the mist, It ricochets between stone walls, reaches the market beyond, and even the distant causeways. The whole city hears it and pauses. The moment is thick enough to taste. Then, as if on cue, a second wave of instruments answers from the temple precincts, rattles, whistles, flutes carved from bone and clay. The conch call has become a conductor's baton, summoning an entire sonic landscape into being. This was how the Aztecs synchronized life. Farmers in Chinampas might hear the shell and know which ritual hour had begun. Warriors sharpening obsidian blades might stop and bow their heads. Fishermen like the one beside you might whisper small prayers for calm waters. Even lovers in the reed huts might pause mid-conversation, listening to the voice of the gods passing overhead. A quirky fringe theory claims the conch tones once doubled as early weather signals, that priests could speak to winds through specific note intervals. There's no solid proof, but it's tempting to imagine some priestly DJ experimenting with the climate. And now, a gentle drizzle for the maize fields, courtesy of DJ Acatl. As the ritual deepens, you notice a strange harmony between sound and landscape. The lake acts like an amplifier, sending the notes outward in shimmering rings. Every call seems to stretch miles, bouncing off the distant mountains. You close your eyes, and for a second, the entire Valley of Mexico is singing a bowl of echoes. Perfectly tuned. The young acolytes shift to another rhythm. Their turtle shells now keep a quicker beat. The priest's assistants pour colored water blue from herbs, red from crushed cochineal into small bowls, each pigment shimmering in the early light. One by one, they dip their fingers and flick droplets toward the east. Each flick lands with a faint TCH, merging with the percussion. It's art and prayer and physics all at once. Then the conch falls silent, not abruptly, more like it sighs itself out, a note dissolving into mist. For a moment, the lake mirrors everything: clouds, mountains, the temple peaks catching flame-colored sunlight. You realize you've been holding your breath. The silence that follows feels deliberate, as if absence itself is part of the music. In that quiet, you hear something new, a heartbeat, maybe your own, maybe the city's. The priest lowers his head, and the acolytes step back. The crowd murmurs. Someone whispers that Acatl has accepted the offering, that the winds will be kind today. You're tempted to ask who told them that, but then the breeze itself answers, cool and sudden, rippling the water like laughter. A small child nearby tries to mimic the shell sound by blowing into her cupped hands. It's awful, high-pitched, more duck than deity. But her mother smiles anyway, patting her hair. Maybe that's how it begins, each generation trying to recreate what was lost. One honking attempt at a time. You linger a bit longer, staring at the rippling surface. Somewhere beneath those waters lie hundreds of conch shells, offered over centuries. Some cracked, some whole, all filled with the silence of their final note. The thought makes you oddly peaceful. You understand now that every ritual here begins and ends with breath, the simplest, most human sound of all. And as you turn away, the breeze carries the faintest echo of the conch back to you, like a whispered farewell. You climb back toward the plaza as the lake's mist burns away, and suddenly the city opens around you, dazzling, loud, impossibly alive. Stone causeways from beneath thousands of feet, and from the heart of it all rises a sound so huge it feels like weather. Drums, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, pounding out the heartbeat of the sun. The main temple looms above the crowd, its twin staircases flanked by feathered serpents that seem to shiver in the heat. Smoke lifts from incense pots, turning sunlight into golden fog. You stop at the edge of the great square, your skin prickling with vibration. This is no background beat. It's commandment, cosmic law set to rhythm. At the center stand the drummers, bare-chested, painted in black and red. They strike the huwedel, tall drums carved from hollowed logs, and the teponaztli, slit drums shaped like sleeping jaguars. Each instrument speaks with its own voice. The huwedel thunders like a storm, rolling through canyons, while the teponaztli laughs in sharp wooden bursts. Together they create something bigger than melody, more like pulse. A priest once wrote that these rhythms kept the universe from freezing. You get it now. Every beat feels like a push against darkness, an insistence that the sun keep rising. Historians still argue whether the ceremonial meters corresponded to planetary cycles or military formations, but standing here, It simply feels like survival music, the kind your bones remember before your mind does. You edge closer until the drummer's movements blur into a single rippling body. Sweat glistens on arms and torsos, reflecting light like liquid bronze. Their hands strike hide with machine-like precision, yet each beat is alive, slightly unpredictable, like conversation between gods. Every so often, one drummer throws back his head and yells a rough, wordless sound that tears through the air. It's not a solo, it's punctuation. A younger drummer beside him wobbles on the rhythm and catches a sharp look from an elder, proof that even cosmic music has deadlines and supervisors. You almost laugh, and the sound surprises you. The laughter vanishes under the next beat, swallowed by the ritual's gravity. The drum's vibration moves through you like a second heartbeat. Your ribs become resonant chambers. You taste metal at the back of your throat, the tang of adrenaline. You remember reading once that the Aztecs used different animal hides for specific tonal qualities: jaguar for ferocity, deer for clarity. Some sources even whisper of human skin drums, though most scholars dismiss that as Spanish horror propaganda. Still, the rumor clings like smoke. The high priest raises a staff, and suddenly the tempo shifts. The Tenochtitlan take the lead now, their paired slits producing to pitches that alternate in a mesmerizing seesaw. Dancers answer from the plaza floor, feathers swirling, sandals slapping stone in time. You can't tell where drum ends and foot begins. Even the shadows seem to dance. A historian once compared Aztec percussion to the city's architecture: precise, layered, mathematical. Yet here, in the middle of it, the experience feels less like math and more like possession. You're being played as much as you're hearing it. The air thickens. Your heartbeat sinks. You realize that sound here is architecture to walls made of vibration, columns of rhythm, a roof of thunder. One of the priests begins to chant over the drums. His voice is raspy but strong, climbing in intervals that seem to bend time. The chant tells of Huitzilopochtli, the warrior son, reborn each dawn through struggle. His enemies, the stars, the moon, the endless dark, are beaten back only through sacrifice and sound. You sense the logic. Music is warfare waged with rhythm instead of blood or still. The line between ritual and battle blurs. On the temple steps, soldiers in jaguar pelts pound smaller hand drums in echo. Their eyes are fierce, their mouths open in silent roars. The air itself becomes an instrument, compressing and releasing like breath. You remember a modern concert you once attended: massive speakers, the crowd swaying as bass thundered through ribs. This is the same energy, just older, raw, unfiltered by electricity. The difference is meaning. For you, the music entertained. For them, it ensured cosmic balance. No pressure, right? The drummers hit a final synchronized strike. The sound explodes outward, bouncing off stone, then hangs, trembling, in the silence that follows. It's almost unbearable, like the city itself is holding its breath. Somewhere a baby cries, and even that tiny voice sounds musical, part of the same great pattern. Then the chorus begins again, softer this time. The rhythm turns circular, looping in on itself. It feels like time folding a sonic Ouroboros. You think of all the mornings before this one, all the dawns these same rhythms have greeted. Maybe that's what eternity sounds like. Repetition so perfect it forgets to end. A fringe scholar once proposed that these drums doubled as seismic sensors, that the priests could feel tremors in the instrument bodies before earthquakes struck. Far-fetched, sure, but you can't deny how sensitive the Huitl seems, how it breathes with the ground. Maybe music and geology shared nerves back then. The priests signal completion. Smoke from fresh copal swirls, mixing with sweat and dust until the air becomes thick enough to taste. The crowd begins to hum low notes, a collective drone under the fading percussion. You join without thinking, your voice trembling, half embarrassed but deeply calm. And then quiet. Total. The drummers lower their sticks. The echo lingers a heartbeat longer, then slips into memory. You feel strangely hollow, like the sound took a piece of you with it. Around you, people sigh, smile, wipe faces, murmur blessings. Someone beside you whispers that the drums speak the language of the gods. You believe it. You also suspect the gods might be slightly deaf by now. But that's between you and cosmic customer service. The sun is higher now. light gleaming on the temple's golden plates. The heat begins to press against your shoulders. As you move away from the plaza, you realize your own footsteps have fallen into rhythm, small, echoing reminders that the music hasn't stopped. It's just migrated inside you. And so you keep walking, carrying the echo of the huedel like a secret heartbeat, toward the dancers who wait beyond the temple's shadow. The plaza opens into a wide court tiled in sun-baked stone, and at its center the dancers are already moving, hundreds of them, feathers trembling like living flame. You pause, still feeling the echo of the drums inside your ribs, and the rhythm slides naturally into the pattern of their feet. You're not just watching, you're caught in the current. The ground itself seems to breathe in sync with them. Each dancer wears anklets strung with rows of seed pods and shells. As they leap, the rattles hiss soft at first, then sharper, layering over one another until the whole field sounds like a summer storm building in slow motion. The smell of crushed herbs rises where their sandals strike, releasing a sweetness that drifts above the sweat and incense. Their leader, tall, painted blue and crowned in quetzal feathers, raises his hands, and the dancers tighten formation. The circle spins faster, each body an arrow round a sacred center you can't quite see. For a moment you forget the crowd, the heat, the noise. There's only motion and the dry whisper of rattles, like wind through dry leaves. You try to count their steps but give up quickly. The rhythm folds in on itself, unpredictable but coherent. The way waves never break the same way twice. Every movement seems to retell a myth, the birth of the fifth sun, the wars of the gods, the endless cycle of death and rebirth. It's choreography as scripture. Historians still argue whether these dances were scripted ritual or spontaneous trance. But from where you stand, it's both meticulous and possessed at once. The drums resume in the distance, slower now, like a giant heartbeat pacing the dancers. They respond instantly, feet striking stone with bone-deep certainty. One woman spins, her feather skirt blooming like a sudden bird. Another drops to her knees, arms outstretched to the sky. Around them, the circle ripples in answer. You realize this isn't performance, it's invocation. Each step is a syllable, each gesture a word in a language only the gods fully understand. A young boy weaves through the outer ring carrying a clay jar of burning copal. The smoke trails behind him, leaving glowing streaks in the sunlight. As he passes, you catch a faint whiff, sweet, resinous, familiar now, and feel the air around you thicken again. Like the border between worlds has become porous. The scent, the sound, the color, it's all one thing. You can't help noticing the practical side of it too. Keeping that many feathers in place must be an Olympic-level logistics challenge. Somewhere backstage, there's probably a very stressed craftsman muttering, "If one more quetzal plume sheds, I'm sacrificing myself." The thought almost makes you laugh, and the absurdity feels human, grounding. The dancers pivot as a group, and for the first time, you see their faces clearly. They're not grim acolytes, they're joyous, radiant, alive. Sweat streaks their paint, but their eyes shine with focus. You feel a pang of envy again. Their entire existence in this moment is sound and motion, nothing extra. From the temple steps, musicians join in with bone flutes and whistles shaped like jaguars and eagles. The shrill cries cut through the heavy drumbeat, mimicking the calls of the sacred animals. The effect is surreal, a chorus of beasts circling the dancers, half real, half imagined. You remember reading that the Aztecs believed music could summon animal spirits to guard the ceremony. Watching now, you don't doubt it. The air itself feels crowded with unseen wings and paws. A historian once wrote that Aztec dance was geometry made audible. Watching the pattern shift, concentric rings, intersecting diagonals, sudden spirals, you understand. The floor is an altar, the dancers it's sacred math. Their feet carve invisible sigils that only the gods can read. The lead dancer suddenly drops to one knee, slamming a hand against the ground. The entire group freezes mid-motion, every rattle silenced in perfect unison. Then, as if the earth exhales, they rise again, slower, more solemn. The drums answer with a deep roll, echoing like distant thunder. You can almost feel the story changing tone from creation to sacrifice, from sunlight to twilight. And then comes the chant. Not words, exactly, but rhythmic syllables, ya, yo, ha, tu. The sound climbs in pitch, swelling until it fills the plaza. You realize it's built to travel upward, a sonic ladder to the gods perched above. The dancers' mouths open in unison, and the chant vibrates against your skin. The hairs on your arms rise. Somewhere inside you, a primitive part recognizes this sound older than language, older than fear. A fringe theory once claimed that some dance grounds were acoustically designed to echo certain frequencies, amplifying the trance. Standing here, you start to believe it. The plaza seems to hum back at them, each shout bouncing and returning richer, deeper, transformed. The city itself joins the ceremony. The tempo shifts again. The rattles quicken, the feet blur. Dust kicks up, forming a halo round the performers. Through the haze you glimpse colors: jade, turquoise, crimson, flashing like living gemstones. You're dizzy just watching. You can't tell if minutes or hours have passed. Time, apparently, doesn't apply when you're dancing the cosmos back into balance. Finally, the rhythm slows. The circle unwinds, movements growing gentle, deliberate, like the tide retreating. One by one the dancers bow, touching the ground, then their foreheads. The rattles fall silent, leaving only the echo of the last drumbeat drifting upward into the bright noon. The lead dancer steps forward and scatters a handful of maize kernels. They bounce and skitter across the stone, a tiny, satisfying percussion that seems to sign the ritual's ending. Around you, spectators murmur blessings. A few children try to mimic the steps, and somewhere a vendor shouts about fresh tamales. A reminder that even divine ceremonies break for snacks. You smile, because even gods must get hungry. As the crowd disperses, a stray feather flutters down and lands at your feet. You pick it up. It's impossibly soft, still warm from motion. You twirl it between your fingers, and for a heartbeat, the faintest hiss of the rattles returns, echoing in your ears like memory refusing to fade. You tuck the feather into your belt and keep walking, following the smoke trails toward the temple, where voices are beginning to rise from behind the columns. The dancers have left their rhythm in the air. The priests will turn it into words. The air thickens as you step into the shadowed corridor leading toward the inner sanctum. The drums and rattles fade behind you, replaced by a steady murmur of human voices. Each step feels heavier, slower, as if the sound itself changes the density of air. You pass carved pillars streaked with soot, walls painted with spirals and suns, their pigments cracked but still vivid. A low chant vibrates through the stone, and before you see them, you feel the singers like a pulse through the floor. You emerge into a dim hall filled with smoke. Incense coils in lazy ribbons, carrying the scent of pine and resin. The room is packed shoulder to shoulder with devotees, faces half lit by torchlight. Their eyes are closed, mouths moving in unison. The sound is unlike anything you've heard before. Not melody, not speech, but a strange in-between, a weaving of syllables that rise and fall like tides. It's hypnotic. You notice that the chant has no clear starting point. People join mid-phrase, drop out, rejoin later. The rhythm ripples rather than marches. It's as if the song is alive, inhaling and exhaling through hundreds of human throats. The language Nahuatl rolls, soft and fluid, each consonant melting into the next. The repetition pulls you under like water. In the center stands a circle of priests, bare-chested and painted in black stripes. One holds a smoking bowl of copal. Another keeps the beat with a hand drum. They lead the chant, their voices rough but unwavering. A woman's voice rises above them, high and trembling, a sound so pure it almost breaks. It's not beautiful in the polished, operatic sense. It's raw, human, divine. You catch yourself breathing in time with her. Historians still argue whether these temple chants were fixed hymns or improvised offerings, changing with each priest's inspiration. The Aztec codices hint at both, songs tied to specific deities, but open enough for personal emotion. You decide it doesn't matter. The power lies in the collective sound. The way hundreds of people merge into one vibrating organism. The air grows hotter. Torches flicker. Someone shakes a rattle made of dried gourds, the seeds inside whispering like rain on leaves. The chanting grows louder, faster. You can no longer distinguish individual words, only rhythm and tone. And somewhere beneath that, something else, an undertone, low and steady. That seems too deep to be human. You glance toward the altar, where a figure kneels in the smoke. You can barely see their face, only the glint of obsidian ornaments. The chant seems to pivot around them. Every time their lips move, the rest of the hall follows half a beat later, as if echoing a secret command. You realize this is the Tenochtitlan, the high priest, the human amplifier for divine messages. His voice cracks once, briefly, and even that imperfection feels sacred, like proof that the divine speaks through fragile material. The smell shifts, less sweet now, more pungent, earthy. Someone throws dried herbs into the brazier. The smoke thickens, curling in slow waves. You rub your eyes, and when you open them again, the chamber looks blurred, unreal. The torches seem to sway though there's no wind. The voices blur together until they sound like one continuous tone, a drone that fills every inch of space. A fringe theory claims that the Aztecs used specific frequencies to induce trance states, that the architecture of temples amplified those resonances. Skeptics roll their eyes, but you can't deny the physical sensation. The stone walls hum faintly under your fingertips, and your heartbeat slows, sensing with the chant. Maybe that's the point, not to summon gods from the sky, but to tune human bodies to the same pitch as the divine. Someone near you whispers a prayer to Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror. The name slips into the rhythm easily, swallowed by the chant. You remember the myth, how the god's obsidian mirror showed not just reflections, but truth, often truths mortals didn't want. You glance at the polished stone discs hanging on the wall, and almost expect to see movement inside them. The woman's voice rises again, cutting through the male chorus like a streak of lightning. She sings a single phrase, repeating it over and over, each time slightly higher. The crowd responds each time, softer, slower, like call and echo between heaven and earth. The torches flare brighter for a moment, and you could swear the smoke forms shapes, faces, animals, maybe memories. You blink, and they're gone. The chant shifts, tone deeper, slower, more somber. It's clear now that the ceremony is nearing its heart. The priests beat their drums in a steady, heartbeat rhythm. You realize your own chest mirrors it. You've lost the distinction between hearing and feeling. Around you, people begin to sway, eyes still closed. No one leads anymore. The sound sustains itself. There's a break, a silence so sudden it feels like the floor dropped away. For several seconds, nothing. Even the fire seems to hold its breath. Then, one by one, the singers release a final sigh, long and low. It's not a word, not a note, but something in between, like the exhale after a dream. You think it's over, but then comes the faintest whisper, not human, more like a trick of air moving through stone. It curls around your ear, just enough to make your skin prickle. Maybe it's echo. Maybe it's something older. A priest nearby smiles faintly, as if hearing it too. The gods answer softly. He murmurs. His voice sounds both amused and exhausted, like someone used to dealing with very demanding celestial management. The congregation begins to stir, stretching, coughing, murmuring blessings. The trance dissolves into chatter. You find yourself oddly disappointed. It's like waking too soon from a good dream. As people file out, a young acolyte collects bits of ash and leftover incense, placing them carefully in small bowls. Nothing wasted. Even the residue has purpose. You linger by one of the obsidian mirrors, half expecting to hear the chant still resonating from within the stone. Instead, there's only your reflection, eyes wide, skin smudged with smoke. The silence feels heavier than the sound ever did. When you finally step outside, the bright light stuns you. The plaza noise rushes back in drums, laughter, hawkers calling. The contrast feels almost violent, but beneath all that bustle, you can still hear it, the faint, lingering hum of those voices, the echo of something divine hiding in mortal lungs. You breathe deeply, and the air tastes of both smoke and sunlight. Somewhere behind you, another shell trumpet calls, signaling the next ritual. The day moves forward, unstoppable, and you follow, ears still ringing with sacred whispers that refuse to fade. The afternoon sun dips, and the plaza begins to glow gold and crimson. You move toward a lesser temple, a circular one this time, dedicated to Aztec, the wind god. The air is cooler here, restless, always shifting. Feathers hang from every beam, fluttering at the slightest breeze, and you swear they hum faintly when the wind passes through them. A group of musicians waits near the entrance, tuning instruments that look more like sculptures than tools, turtle shells strung with cords, rattles made of woven reeds, and bone flutes carved with spiral designs. You notice that none of them play, yet they listen. Every head tilts slightly, every ear tuned to the invisible breath moving through the courtyard. It's as though they're collaborating with the air itself. When the first note finally comes, it's nearly silent, a whisper of sound, thin and high, like wind over glass. The flutist holds the instrument close to their lips, eyes closed, breath steady. You realize they're not blowing into the flute, they're breathing through it. The tone shifts with the rhythm of inhalation and exhalation, as natural as lungs filling and emptying. The others join gradually. A turtle shell drum thumps once, twice, like the first two raindrops before a storm. A second flutist enters with a deeper, more mournful tone. The sound of wind through the temple columns joins in, creating accidental harmonies. You can't tell where the music ends and nature begins. It's mesmerizing, fragile. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs composed these performances with notation or improvised them by ritual memory. Some suggest the musicians followed the direction of wind and fire, literally allowing the environment to guide their tempo. That theory would fit what you're hearing now. The music bends with every gust, adjusts to every shift in air dot, and then, without warning, a sudden gust sweeps through the courtyard. The feathers tremble, the flutes shriek slightly off-key, and the musicians grin because that's what they were waiting for. The moment of chaos. They follow it, chase it, turn it into rhythm. One performer holds up a conch shell, smooth, iridescent, heavy as a heart. They blow into it, and the sound that erupts is enormous, oceanic. It rolls over the plaza like thunder, echoing off stone and mountain alike. You feel it in your ribs. The audience gasps but doesn't move. It's part of the ceremony, a greeting to Ahaxatl himself. The priests say Hecatl's laughter sounds like flutes in a storm, and right now, the sky seems to agree. The wind picks up, swirling dust into spirals. The musicians adjust again, weaving the roaring air into their melody. You laugh under your breath. It's chaos, but beautiful chaos. The kind of sound no modern orchestra could capture because it depends on imperfection. Each gust adds a unique distortion. Each missed note becomes sacred. You realize how arrogant it is that modern ears crave precision. The Aztecs understood that beauty often hides in unpredictability. One of the quirkiest surviving notes from colonial chroniclers claims that these wind ceremonies sometimes ended with everyone mimicking the god's voice, basically hundreds of people whistling, sighing, or humming together. The priests called it Tlapitzali in Ahaxatl, the flute of the wind. You can't help but grin at the image of an entire city whistling in harmony. Like the world's oldest mass karaoke night, a musician kneels beside the central altar, placing a small jade bead in front of the feathered idol. The sound softens, the flutes become gentler, the rhythm steadier. You feel your own breathing slow to match. You've gone from observer to participant without even realizing it. And just when the trance sets in, there's a sudden shift, a new sound unlike any before. Someone drags a bone rasp across a notched stick, producing a gritty, insect-like buzz. It's unsettling, almost mechanical, like the voice of some unseen creature. The audience murmurs, unsure whether to laugh or bow. The musician smirks. Apparently, they meant to startle you. The rasping grows softer, merges with the flutes, until it becomes another texture in the wind song. You catch yourself thinking that this might have been the point all along, to remind you that the gods' voices aren't always pleasant. They're wild, unpredictable, capable of biting as well as blessing. Historians still argue whether Hecatl's worship predates the Aztecs entirely, possibly borrowed from the Toltecs or even older cultures. But here, now, it feels eternal. Wind existed before temples, before language. The flutes just gave it form. As the music fades, the musicians lean their instruments against the altar. The feathers above your head continue to quiver, making soft, ghostly sighs. The ceremony is over, but the air refuses to settle. You can almost hear residual notes lingering between gusts. A young boy passes carrying a bowl of colored sand, sprinkling it in thin lines that swirl and vanish instantly. You realize he's not decorating. He's feeding the wind, offering it color to play with. That's something you won't find in any academic paper. You turn to leave, and for a moment, the wind rushes against your ear so sharply it almost sounds like a whisper. Don't forget me. You shiver despite the warmth. Maybe it's just imagination. Maybe not. By the time you return to the main avenue, the plaza is glowing again. This time from torches being lit for the night. You pass a vendor selling roasted maize, and the smell alone could make anyone believe in divine generosity. You buy a handful, the kernels hot and smoky, and think about the flutes still echoing inside the circular temple. The world feels quieter, but not empty, just waiting for the next breath. Somewhere nearby, another conch shell sounds. This one lower, slower, signaling a shift from wind to fire. You know where to go next. Your body is already learning the rhythm of the city's ceremonies, one element at a time, and as you walk toward that sound, the wind follows you, tugging gently at your hair as if to remind you that nothing sacred ever truly ends, it just changes form. The torches paint the plaza in trembling orange light as you follow the sound of drums toward the fire temple. The air is denser here, almost metallic, thick with smoke and heat. Sparks rise like fireflies, and the scent of resin and singed feathers blends into something oddly comforting, like a campfire that somehow remembers ancient hymns. At the center stands a massive brazier, flames dancing taller than a man. Around it, dozens of priests circle slowly, their garments lined with tiny mirrors that catch the firelight. You can hardly look directly at them. Each movement sends flashes of light darting like spirits through the smoke. Someone once called these reflections the eyes of the gods, and right now, you understand why. The drums begin a deep, measured rhythm, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Two men strike massive wooden slit drums, huedel, with padded sticks. Each thud echoes off the stone and rolls through your chest. A third drummer joins in with a higher, sharper teponastli, its pitch flickering like the flames it accompanies. Together, they weave a pattern that feels almost mathematical, yet alive. The high priest steps forward carrying a torch made of twisted pine branches. His face gleams with sweat and gold dust. He lifts the torch toward the sky, shouts a phrase in Nahuatl that crackles through the air, and plunges it into the brazier. The flames leap higher, and the crowd roars approval. You catch fragments of chant prayers to Xiuhtecutli, Lord of Fire, Keeper of Time. A scholar once wrote that the Aztecs viewed fire not as destruction, but as renewal, a constant act of cosmic maintenance. Without the flame, the sun might falter, and the world would literally run out of time. You look at the priests, their eyes reflecting the blaze, and you realize this ceremony isn't metaphorical for them. It's survival work. Historians still argue whether these fire rites involved controlled self-sacrifice, tiny burns, offered to prove devotion, or whether that's just colonial exaggeration. You spot one priest pressing his palm near the flame until smoke curls between his fingers. He doesn't flinch. Maybe faith really does burn differently. Then the music changes. The drummers pause, replaced by a single voice, a woman again, older this time, her tone low and resonant. She sings in a minor scale, her notes deliberate, each held just long enough to echo. You can't understand the words, but the emotion is unmistakable: reverence, exhaustion, love. A young man enters the circle, carrying a clay pot filled with glowing embers. He kneels, sets it carefully before the brazier, and begins tapping its rim with a stick. The pot rings, surprisingly clear, like a bell made of earth. The rhythm merges with the song until you can't tell which leads which. You realize that even their instruments are chosen to mirror the elements: the pot for earth, the flame for sky. There's a joke waiting in your mind, something about this being the world's oldest drum circle. But it dies quickly when the crowd falls completely silent. You sense a shift in the air, a thick pause that feels sacred. The high priest steps forward again, holding a long wooden staff topped with obsidian shards. He moves it through the flame. The glass catches light and scatters it into prismatic shards. The crowd gasps. Then he begins to hum low, steady, wordless. The vibration seems to join the fire's crackle, creating a sound that feels halfway between roar and purr. A fringe theory from acoustic archaeologists claims that obsidian tools, when heated, can resonate faintly, producing subsonic tones that you can feel more than hear. Standing here, you wouldn't dare dismiss it. Your stomach vibrates softly, the air thickens, and it feels like standing inside a living heartbeat. The woman's voice joins his hum, weaving around it like smoke twining up a flame. Their sounds rise together, then diverge, then rejoin. forming harmonics so precise it feels orchestrated by the gods themselves. The fire dances higher with each crest. You realize that this is not just music, it's a dialogue. The flame answers their voices in shape and intensity. A young acolyte nearby whispers that the ceremony ensures the sun will rise tomorrow. You nod automatically, not because you believe it, but because right now, it's easier to accept that explanation than to rationalize the electricity rippling up your arms. The chant expands, more voices join in, then more, until the entire plaza hums in synchrony. It's not loud, but immense. The collective sound merges with the fire's rhythm until both become one pulsing entity. Even the stars seem to tremble faintly above, caught in the resonance. You notice something strange. Each time the chant crescendos, the flames bend slightly eastward, toward the direction of dawn. Maybe it's coincidence, maybe centuries of careful ritual engineering. Either way, the alignment is eerie, precise. The priests scatter handfuls of ground maize into the fire. The flames erupt into brief green flashes, sodium flares. You realize, but the crowd gasps as though witnessing divine laughter. You catch yourself grinning too. Magic or chemistry, it doesn't matter. Both make your heart race. Historians still argue about how much of this was meant for gods and how much for people to awe, to unite, to remind everyone of the delicate machinery of existence. Watching now, you suspect the line between worship and theater never really existed. The drums return, faster, more chaotic, the sound climbing toward a fever pitch. The flames surge again, painting everything in wild motion. Shadows leap and clash like dancing spirits. Then, suddenly, all sound stops. Even the fire seems to freeze mid-flicker. The silence is deafening. You realize your own heartbeat is the only rhythm left. The high priest raises his hand, fingers trembling with reflected light. Then he speaks softly, almost conversationally. You catch the word shiu, meaning both fire and year, renewal. The torches around the plaza are extinguished one by one. The crowd doesn't move. You stand there, bathed in the last light of the central flame, feeling like time itself has held its breath. When the final ember dies, darkness takes the square. For a few long seconds, nobody speaks. Then, somewhere in the distance, a single flute note rises, gentle, reassuring. Like a sigh of relief, the crowd murmurs prayers of thanks, and laughter trickles through the silence. Someone nearby jokes, "Guess the sun's got another shift tomorrow." You exhale. The people begin to disperse, leaving trails of smoke and soft conversation. The stars above feel sharper now, clearer. You can still feel heat clinging to your skin. The afterimage of flame flickering behind your eyelids dot as you walk away. You glance back once more. The brazier glows faintly, as if still breathing. The temple drums lie silent, their surfaces shining like captured dusk. You wonder how many nights like this unfolded before anyone thought to write them down, and how many songs were lost between the flames and the silence. The wind picks up again, cool against your face, as if the gods of air and fire trade shifts in the great cosmic orchestra. You smile at the thought. Even deities, it seems, respect a good duet. The city doesn't sleep, it exhales. As midnight drapes itself over Tenochtitlan, the noise softens from shouts to murmurs, from drums to distant ripples of laughter and song. You wander the causeways where the water mirrors the moon, and you can still hear faint music from a floating garden, a mix of flutes, small drums, and something else, something unplaceable, like the echo of the day's rituals lingering between stars. You follow the sound to the edge of a canal where a few canoes drift lazily. Each one carries a group of people gathered around tiny braziers, their reflections shimmering in the black water. Someone plucks a 4-string teponastli, softer than the ones from the temple, a more personal, nocturnal version. The rhythm is slower, gentler, intimate. This is the music of rest, not worship. A woman hums as she threads garlands of flowers, her voice lilting in the air like perfume. The melody sounds improvised, but each note lands perfectly between silence and echo. Her song tells a story, something about missing the wind, or maybe asking the moon to send dreams safely home. The language flows like water, full of words that ripple instead of stop. You sit by the water's edge, half hidden in shadow, listening. The city feels transformed at night. Gone are the ceremonial calls, the roaring drums, the strict rhythm of faith. This is the secret heartbeat of the empire, the sound of ordinary people who survive their gods by singing softly to themselves. Historians still argue whether these nightly songs were part of ritual or just the human need to fill silence. Colonial records call them idle chants, but you can tell there's more. The melodies shift subtly toward patterns you heard earlier in the temple. Maybe it's not defiance, but continuation. The gods asleep, the people still whispering lullabies to keep them dreaming. A fisherman dips his oar into the water, and the ripples add percussion. Children toss pebbles that plunk in rhythm. The entire scene becomes an accidental orchestra built from motion, breath, and chants. You can't help but smile. For a civilization obsessed with cosmic order, they seem to embrace chaos beautifully. When the sun sets, someone hands you a small cup of pulque fermented maguey sap, sweet and milky. You sip cautiously. It's sour but soothing, the kind of drink that makes your eyelids heavier. The man beside you grins. Good, right? Makes even bad singers sound divine. You laugh and cough at the same time, which earns you a friendly pat on the back. Then a new sound emerges, an old man's voice, gravelly but commanding. The others hush immediately. He begins to chant something ancient, slower than song, older than story. The words roll out like stones being placed carefully in a circle. You can't translate, but you feel it. Gratitude for the day, sorrow for what's lost, hope for dawn. There's a phrase he repeats often: Laltakutli Tlazokamati, Earth Lord, thank you, each time he says it. The others echo softly. The repetition becomes hypnotic, the kind of rhythm that smooths your heartbeat and quiets your thoughts. A quirk of these late-night gatherings, some chroniclers note, was that anyone could add a verse. Poetry wasn't owned by priests, it was shared like fire. And sure enough, a young woman adds a line of her own, something playful, and everyone laughs. Even the old man cracks a grin. It feels like the world's first open mic night, centuries before coffee houses and microphones. Then silence returns, thick and tender. The torches flicker. A frog croaks somewhere in the dark, and instead of breaking the spell, it fits perfectly. One of the flutists mimics the sound, turning it into part of the melody. Nature doesn't interrupt here. It joins the performance. You glance across the canal and see another boat drifting past, carrying more singers. For a moment, the two groups' melodies overlap, creating a brief, accidental harmony across the water. You can't tell if it's planned or pure coincidence, but either way, it's breathtaking. You wonder how many nights like this happen, millions of quiet concerts no one ever recorded. Historians still argue about whether the Aztecs viewed music as an art or a duty. Standing here, you decide it was both, devotion by other means, worship when the priests were asleep, when the temples went dark, when only the moon listened. The music fades slowly. The old man yawns, and people begin to lie down in their canoes, using cloaks for blankets. The water laps softly against the wooden hulls. You watch the braziers burn lower, the glow dimming to embers that drift lazily upward. It feels impossibly peaceful, like the city itself is sighing. You tilt your head back. The Milky Way stretches like a river above you, bright enough to paint faint reflections on the canal. Somewhere in that expanse, you imagine the gods listening to, half amused, half lulled to sleep by the fragile songs of mortals. You close your eyes, and for a brief moment, you think you hear something beneath the water. Not fish, not wine, something deeper, like a memory. Maybe the lake itself remembers the songs sung to it every night. Maybe it hums them back in secret. When you open your eyes again, the flutes have stopped. The city is silent, the kind of silence that feels full instead of empty. You rise quietly, stretch, and start walking back toward the mainland. The causeway stones are cool under your feet, and your footsteps echo faintly, a small percussion added to the night's fading symphony. The moon hangs directly above the temple district now, silvering the pyramid's edges. You can still see thin trails of smoke rising from braziers and chimneys. Somewhere, a single shell horn calls out once, then fades. You exhale slowly, realizing how far you've come, not just through streets, but through time, through layers of lost sound that still cling to the air like perfume. And as you reach the city's heart again, a thought lingers in your mind. Maybe none of these sounds are truly gone. Maybe the stones remember, vibrating softly under each passing step. And maybe, if you listen just right, you can still hear the music between heartbeats. You wake or maybe just drift from that near-sleeping haze that follows too much pulque and moonlight. Dawn hasn't come yet, but something else stirs the city. A faint rumble, like the sound of many feet moving in rhythm. You blink into the half-dark and realize it's not the people this time, it's the lake. The water itself shivers under the breeze, echoing the pulse of drums far away. You follow that pulse again, because apparently sleep isn't invited tonight. The sound draws you toward the southern edge of the sacred precinct, where the priests of water, the keepers of Tlaloc, hold their dawn ritual. Mist clings to the ground, turning torchlight into halos. You can barely see your own hands, but the air vibrates with low chanting and the deep slosh of water. Poured from one clay vessel into another dot. When you reach the steps, you stop. Before you is a pool perfectly still except for ripples caused by the priests' careful motions. They wear turquoise masks shaped like storm clouds, and their voices merge in a rhythm that feels less like music and more like breathing shared between humans and sky. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies were meant to call actual rain or to remind the gods that humans hadn't forgotten their end of the cosmic bargain. Either way, it's clear that the Aztecs treated water not just as resource, but personality. A moody, generous, easily offended deity. One priest kneels at the edge of the pool, blowing across the lip of a small flute carved from clay. The tone it makes is so high and pure it barely sounds human. It hovers right on the threshold of hearing, like the ring in your ears after loud music. The note trembles, multiplies, becomes a shimmering chorus as more flutes join in. And then comes the strangest sound you've heard yet, a roar that seems to come from beneath your feet. You realize it's a huge conch, so large a man must use both hands to lift it. The player blows once, and the note rolls out like thunder over the lake. The water responds, ripples widening in perfect circles. The sky lightens slightly, as if listening. A scholar once suggested that these ceremonies doubled as early weather forecasting. The priests observed the echo of their own sounds on the water to predict wind and rain patterns. Maybe myth and meteorology weren't so separate after all. Another priest steps forward, sprinkling maize flour into the pool. The powder floats for a moment before swirling into pale clouds. He speaks a short verse in Nahuatl, and the words sound like laughter and sobbing at once. Tlaloc, drink well, but leave us enough, a joke and a prayer in the same breath. You can't help but smile. Humans always bargaining with nature, always politely asking chaos to behave. The conch sounds again, longer this time. The vibration moves through your ribs, up into your jaw. You can taste salt on your lips even though this is fresh water. It feels like the world's lungs are inflating. Historians still argue whether the instruments themselves were symbolic, each flute for a cloud, each drumbeat for thunder. But standing here, it's obvious the symbolism doesn't matter as much as the effect. The sound makes you feel part of the sky's machinery. Then comes the rain, not heavy, not sudden, but a fine mist, soft as breath. The priests lift their faces, laughing quietly. They don't stop playing. The flutes trill higher. The drums mimic raindrops. The conch bellows one last time, then fades into the dawn. The synchronization is eerie, perfect, like they knew exactly when the first drop would fall. A fringe theory claims that the Aztecs performed secret water concerts inside caves to amplify and distort sound, creating natural reverb chambers. Some archaeologists have found stalactites marked by soot where torches once burned. You imagine the resonance in such a place: water, stone, and human voice merging into something primordial. You tilt your head up. The sky is brightening into silver. The mist thickens, curling around the temple columns. Every sound becomes gentler, softer, as though the world is waking up reluctantly. The flutes stop one by one until only the drip of rain remains. A young acolyte wades into the pool, scooping water into a gourd. He hands it to an older priest, who drinks deeply, then sprinkles a few drops onto the ground. For the mountain, he says. For the roots. Then he turns and offers the gourd to you. You hesitate. Tourists aren't supposed to accept divine beverages, but curiosity wins. The water is cold, almost sweet. When you exhale, it smells faintly of minerals and smoke. The priest nods approvingly. Now you carry the sound too, he says. You have no idea what that means. But as you leave, You notice that your footsteps splash faintly louder than before, as if the water itself wants to announce your passing. The city begins to stir. Women sweep steps, dogs stretch, vendors yawn awake. The ceremonies dissolve back into daily life, just as seamlessly as night becomes morning. No divide, no boundary. You pass a baker pulling steaming Tlaxcali flatbread from a stone oven. He hums the same melody you heard from the boats hours ago. Continuity disguised as coincidence. You realize something that makes you grin sleepily. This civilization may have vanished in body, but its rhythm never stopped. It flows through every modern heartbeat, every rainstorm, every quiet moment when humans look up and whisper something to the sky without expecting an answer. A conch sounds again, distant now, like a farewell. You turn toward it, the mist thinning as sunlight breaks through. Gold glints on temple walls, on wet stone, on the surface of the lake. Everything seems to shimmer with leftover sound. You walk slower now, letting the rhythm of the city guide you one last time. Each footstep is a drumbeat, each breath a flute note, each passing breeze a verse from a language that never truly died. The lost sounds of the Aztec ceremonies aren't lost at all, they're just quieter. Waiting for ears patient enough to listen between raindrops, you stop at the edge of the plaza, watching sunlight catch on puddles, turning them briefly into mirrors. For an instant, you see the reflection of a masked priest smiling faintly back before the image dissolves. Maybe imagination, maybe memory. You decide not to question it, because sometimes you think, the gods don't need temples or offerings, they just need someone to remember the sound. Years later, back in the modern world, you find yourself walking through the heart of Mexico City. On a humid evening, the rain has just ended, and puddles mirror the yellow light of street lamps. Somewhere nearby, a street musician tunes a wooden flute. The note he draws out is brief, uncertain, but it's enough to pull the memory of that Aztec dawn back into your bones. The sound vibrates through the narrow streets like something half alive. Around you, the city hums, car horns, laughter, a food cart sizzling, the faint beat of reggaeton from a passing radio. Yet beneath all that noise, you sense a rhythm older than pavement, older than the Spanish stones beneath it. Anthropologists call this phenomenon cultural palimpsest, layers of memory written one over another, never fully erasing what came before. But to your ear, it feels simpler. The old rhythm still breathes. You follow the flute into Plaza de los Culturas, where ruins of Tlatelolco rise beside a colonial church and a glass government tower. Here, three worlds coexist: Aztec, Spanish, modern, stacked like musical tracks in a single song. The buskers play beneath arches once stained by sacrifice. Their rhythms skip between ancient and urban time signatures. One of them, a woman dressed in bright feathers, beats a small drum with her palm. It's not for tourists, no staged show, no money cup. Her eyes are closed, her movements methodical. Each hit echoes faintly off the church fouade. You can almost hear the huedel in her rhythm, the same temple thunder that once rolled across Tenochtitlan. She starts to chant Nahuatl syllables rising above the drizzle. Tonantzin, Tlaltecutli, Coyol Shockwee. You don't know the words, but the tone feels like a heartbeat. Around her, a few pedestrians pause, curious but not uncomfortable. The sound belongs here. Later that night, in a small cantina, a guitarist plays a son Huasteco, the string dance of the Huasteca people. He bends the note so sharply that it wails like a shell trumpet. His foot keeps time against the floorboards, steady, circular, ritualistic. Someone claps, someone laughs, someone closes their eyes for just a moment too long. This isn't nostalgia, it's survival. The melodies, rhythms, and tonal intervals that once belonged to the Aztec temples didn't vanish when the empire fell. They just adapted, hiding inside folk songs, work chants, and lullabies. Musicologists can trace the same pentatonic patterns, the same call and response phrasing, the same percussive heart that once called the gods of rain and sun. And maybe that's what keeps them alive: repetition, a ritual disguised as entertainment. Every time a drummer keeps the offbeat in a danza, every time a child hums a tune their grandmother swore was just a nursery song, something older exhales. You step back into the street. The rain has returned, soft but steady. It drums on awnings and taxis, on leaves, on the brim of your hat. The rhythm feels familiar. You realize that nature itself never stopped performing the same symphony the Aztecs once mirrored. The endless percussion of water and earth. Somewhere behind the clouds, lightning flashes. For an instant, the entire city looks gold again. Not metaphorical gold, but the bright, wet sheen that made ancient temples glow in the sunrise. You hear the echo of a conch impossible. Probably a bus horn bending through the fog, but it makes you stop anyway. You listen carefully. The city breathes, wind through palms, voices across balconies, footsteps splashing in puddles, all of it aligns for a heartbeat, forming a pulse so precise it feels intentional. Maybe that's all rhythm ever was, the universe keeping time with itself. You think of the priest handing you the gourd of water. Now you carry the sound too. You exhale and realize he was right. The sound didn't stay in the temples, or the lakes, or the instruments, it stayed in people. Every listener, every musician, every moment someone lets sound bridge the past and the present. The Aztec ceremonies aren't lost. They're just everywhere, disguised as rain. And as thunder rolls once more across the modern valley, you whisper half to yourself, half to whatever's still listening, Kueli tonali. Good day, I hear you still. Then you walk on, letting the ancient rhythm fade into the noise of the living city, certain it will find its way back again.